All right. Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to our extraordinary council meeting for Thursday, 9th of June. Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone for being here today, and to those watching online or following the meeting, I know you're here because you care deeply about the future of Waitaki. Now, before we move on to the annual plan decision, I want to extend my support and love to those that have lost homes and belongings in this week's storm event. It's been a really long and stressful week for many in our community. Our state of emergency has now been lifted and we've transitioned into a recovery phase. The assessment, clean-up and welfare checks will continue for some time yet. We also have conserve water notices in Wamaru, which affect Wamaru, Kakanui, Hamden and Moraki residents. A boil and conserve water notice in the lower Waitaki water supply, and conserve water notices for Awamoko and Tokaraki water supplies. I want to sincerely thank our emergency services, civil defence team, council staff, contractors, welfare volunteers, community groups, local businesses and neighbours who have stepped forward. Many have worked through the night into the following days in difficult decisions, focused on safety and restoring access and services as quickly as possible. This has been a really challenging week, but it's also been an amazing demonstration of our strength as a community, and that is something that we can be proud of. So we will step into today's meeting, and I'll start with apologies. I don't believe I have apologies at all, but I do have joining us online Councillor Schlack, Councillor Cowles and Councillor Linwood, so welcome. Is there any declarations of interest, councillors? No, so what we're going to do is move on to the public forum, and we have Kirsty Cashmore and Keith Marshall. Not sure who would like to speak first, but either of you are welcome. You can come up together. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm not here today to answer any questions. You have clearly made up your minds and chosen to ignore your community. I personally feel I have let the 5,500 Waitaki District ratepayers who signed the petition down. More signatures than voted for you, Mayor. Had we had more time, I believe there would have been many, many more signatures. Before I went into this, I believed a mayor and their council's responsibility was to care for and listen to the needs of their community. What an eye-opener this has been. 5,500 ratepayers have very plainly stated that a 17% rate increase is not affordable. How you can stand by and watch people in genuine despair and scared is beyond me. Not only will some have to sell up, but do not underestimate the loss of business to retailers and cafes. I also worry very much about how a person already mentally fragile will act towards their own selves. The Claytons vote for 17%. The media release that 17% had been agreed on before you had voted has to go down as one of your most dishonourable acts. I have watched four councillors. Let me finish.
I would like to first of all.
Let me finish, please.
I have watched
four. Excuse me, I'm finished.
Excuse me, I've asked you to stop for a second, and I'm chairing this meeting. So the vote was made before we stopped for a break. The figures that were discussed in that vote equaled to just below 17%, because they were real figures we were dealing with. They don't have an exact science to it, and that still had to be put into the plan. That came to 16.9% that we had. That vote happened before we broke. The implications of that, meaning it was 17% or 16.9, were the only thing that we didn't clarify publicly.
However you wish to put it. I have watched four councillors who have voted against the rise, fold, and not stand by the strength of their convictions. Personally, I believe you should all step down. Shame on you. As Elie Wiesel, a well-known Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate, once said, one person of integrity can make a difference. I see none here. A vast majority of your community has lost all trust in you and feel very badly let down. You will be remembered for this. It doesn't matter what you do or don't do from here on out. This will be your legacy. I hope you sleep well at night.
Thank you. I don't believe in personalising this because we've got good leaders
I can't
here
hear you
making,
actually.
we've got good leaders making good decisions that are doing their best. And
You
if
may
you're-
think so. I think
Yeah.
if you had an election now, I don't think you'd be sitting there. My personal belief.
I thank you. It's
Carry
a
on,
tough
Keith.
time. Keith.
I'll hang out till you interrupt me.
Hmm.
The petition is well over 5,000 signatures. There are two clear messages in it: that it's unaffordable and that it will cause people harm. 5,500 people told you that. You knew the petition was coming. You chose to meet 2 days before the petition turned up. You decided on that strike before you even got to here. A number of you sitting at this table told me in the meeting where I said to you that there were over 2,000 signatures from the week before, told me that it was just some rabble rousing, some people causing trouble. That does 5,500 people an awful lot of disrespect. You know who you are. I would name names if we were doing that. I'm not. You've never once, not once, considered affordability in your decision making. Show me the papers where you asked for an analysis of affordability. For example, really easy, readily available information that you could have put together in a staff report about the affordability impact. The median personal income in the district is under 35,000. The national average is 41,500. The average household income in this district is 75% of the national average. Over a third more people here are in the dependency ratio than the average in New Zealand. 70% of the district are in the dependency ages of under 15 or over 65. Those are big numbers to just ignore and not even look at. And over a quarter of your population, around a quarter of your population is over 65, 1 in 4 compared to 1 in 6 nationally. So you didn't even look. You know, that's embarrassing, nothing short of embarrassing. And now today, you're going to consider a paper about leniency. You know, that's an admission that you're doing wrong. The definition of the word leniency, have you looked it up? Cambridge Dictionary says treatment in which someone is punished or judged less strongly than otherwise would be expected. That's an abhorrent leniency. Wow, these criminals that you're putting this rate rise on. Terrible. Not one of you personally suffers one jot from this affordability question. Your council pay takes care of that. Council pay that you have that no one else has that's going to be copping this. You've never once explored other alternatives for how you might overcome the supposed debt headroom puzzles. I don't want to cover at length the debt headroom puzzles, but your new figure, which produced in the last week, $7 million headroom. You ignore that you have a $10 million overdraft facility, and you ignore that in order to reach that, you would have to complete every single capital project. Have you done any timing on your debt drawdowns for the year? I reckon at best, if you manage to complete it all, which bearing in mind you only did 65% this year, at best, you'll have a few weeks where you're close to the limit. But actually, you probably won't. Now, just facts, because that's kind of probably where we need to get to here. You were elected by the community to represent them. That is a fact. The community have told you the rate rise is unaffordable. That's a fact. You have ignored them. That's also a fact. And instead of standing by your community, instead of actually looking at affordability and the impacts of that on the community, instead of looking how else you might have addressed that, you instead chose to put debt headroom ahead of the harm you're going to inflict with this. And don't deny the harm. That's what the petition told you. 5,500 people. I stood out in the rain with people who were sobbing because they're not going to be able to make this. You didn't. You were nowhere to be seen. You used great words. You do realise, by definition, it is a fundamentally cowardly act to inflict harm on people who can't protect themselves. You do, because that's kind of the hardcore definition. Worse still, these are the people who voted for you to look after them. You promised them, every single one of you sitting at this table, promised them affordability, and instead you chose the polar opposite. It isn't a tough decision, neither is it leadership. It's just cowardly. True courage and leadership are about putting yourself in harm's way for others. You could still do that today. If you had some genuine courage, you'd vote for 7%. Heck, do it today. Legally you can. Ethically and morally you should. And sure, there'll be consequences, but that's what courage is, accepting the consequences of your actions. It's about standing up for what's right. It's about looking after people who aren't in a position to do it for themselves. Folk voted for you 9 months ago, because they thought you'd look out for them. You told them that affordability was the #1 issue that you were going to take and that you would address that. And here you have why there is 5,500 people telling you that this isn't affordable and it will cause them harm. Well, maybe, to me, the issue you're facing now is you've lost the political mandate of the community. If you genuinely thought you had that political mandate, resign now. Let's test it out with the electorate. That's it.
Thank you.
Good.
Would anyone like to ask you?
Go, sure.
Councillor Hopkins.
Keith, I'm just curious to know, you made a statement there that wasn't enlarged upon, but maybe fruitful so to do. You said if we had the courage to vote for 7% today, there would be consequences, but those consequences are the price of courage. What, in your understanding, would the consequences be?
You would have to go to the minister and say, look, it's going to take us another 10 days to strike the rate at 7%. You could do that. Legally, actually, you could overturn a rate strike once it's done. It's just there isn't a precedent for that in New Zealand. It's legally possible. It hasn't been done. But the consequence would be you're already in breach of not meeting the 30th of June, so another fortnight wouldn't make it any worse. You might have the minister looking at why you should continue in the role, but that would be what? Protecting your own job instead of taking the thing. So that would be potentially one of the consequences, but actually that would be the consequence. Staff work hard, as we know. They do time over the weekends. You could probably get it done in a week and a half if you had to recast the rates. I've done it. Yeah, you shake your head, Mel. You haven't actually done it yourself, so that's good. I have been party to doing that, and we have got it done in 7 days calendar. So you could actually do it, Jim. The consequences would be you'd have to admit that you were wrong. You'd have to let the minister know it's going to be another 10 days.
Thank you. And I think we're done. Thank you, Jim. Appreciated for your time today.
You didn't really, but we came.
Yeah, we can.
5,500 votes in that signatures are not a mistake.
A couple of things I'd like to address. 2 days before submissions were closed, what that date was as well was the day we were supposed to be approving our annual plan. So basically what we did, instead of approving our annual plan, which there was an agenda out there for, is we did change direction to try and actually find some leniency in there. While we knew there was a petition coming, I think it's really important to know that we understood the numbers that were coming through in the submission, and we also understood the tone of what they were asking for. So we've done our best in that time frame to respond to that. But at that stage, we were due on that day to adopt our annual plan. So that's the reason for the date. I also want to address the fact that the cause for a stay offers no answers. It's purely someone else at another time can deal with these prices. So I'm going to open into today's meeting. I want to acknowledge today's public forum speakers, the petition organiser, Kirsty Cashmore and Keith Marshall. I also want to acknowledge every person who signed the petition, attended a meeting, wrote to council, spoke to an elected member, or shared their concerns in recent weeks. The strength of that feeling in our community is real, the pain is real. 16.9% rates increase is significant. And for some households, farms, businesses and pensioners, this will be very hard to absorb. I do not dismiss that for a moment. I've heard the frustration, the worry, the anger, and in some cases the fear for what this means to people who are already facing high costs of living. That weighs heavily on me, and I know it weighs heavily on every elected member around this table. It is important today that we hold two truths at once. First, our community is hurting, and we must keep listening with humility and compassion. Secondly, Council has a responsibility to pass a lawful, responsible annual plan that keeps essential services operating, meets our obligations, and protects the long-term financial position of this district. This is not Council versus community. Council is part of this community. We live here, we work here, raise families here, volunteer here, and we pay rates here too. The decision before us are not abstract numbers on paper. They affect our neighbours, our families, our staff, our businesses, and the services people rely on every day. Elected members have also received the attached letter from Minister of Local Government, the Honourable Simon Watts. I welcome the Minister's recognition that ongoing operating deficits are not sustainable, that councils must be transparent about what's driving their financial position, and that councils are expected to plan responsibly for infrastructure, depreciation, and regulatory standards. I have appreciated the Minister's time and willingness to engage with us and would like to publicly thank him for his offer of assistance, and we will look at taking him up on that. The Minister has also made it clear that local authorities are independently elected and accountable to their communities for financial decisions, including rates and spending. That matters today because this is our decision to make. It cannot be handed to Wellington, to staff or past councils or future councils. We have to make the best decisions we can with the information in front of us, knowing the consequences of action and inaction. At the same time, I want to be clear that some of the pain in this conversation cannot be solved by local councils alone. There are national policy settings that need to be addressed, including whether communities like ours can realistically meet the full cost of critical infrastructure, particularly water infrastructure, within the timeframes and the standards being set. Local government must be accountable for its decisions, but central government has a role in ensuring these expectations are achievable and are fairly funded. We also need to be honest that Waitaki faces large gaps in access to vital social services. Public and community housing settings are limiting the district's ability to respond to growing needs. There are currently no homelessness outreach services operating in our district, and no Housing First program, which is a government-funded approach delivered in other parts of the country to provide long-term housing and support for people experiencing chronic homelessness, despite the need. A recent outreach contract extension was awarded in Dunedin. That does not reach Waihemo, despite Palmerston falling within the Dunedin boundary for MSD service delivery. There are currently no new Kaianga Ora or community housing tenancies allocated for Waitaki, and areas south of Christchurch are not a priority under current settings. These pressures sit alongside the rates conversation because they shape what our community is carrying and what council is being asked to respond to. The 16.9% option before us today is not where the conversation began. We originally faced a 22% increase. The work of elected members and staff, this has been reduced through a combination of easing cost pressures, a one-off $1 million special dividend from Whitestone Contracting, and further savings that may affect the level of services that council can provide. But I need to be clear, 16.9% is not a comfortable number. It is the lowest figure I believe we can responsibly support without undermining the water services delivery plan that was approved only last week pushing council too close to its debt limits, or creating an even larger problem for next year's long-term plan. Water has been the most significant cost driver in recent years, and it's the most significant part of the proposed rates rise today. The overall 16.9 increase includes 43% increase in water. 43%. And that is a rate to fund legal standards, ageing infrastructure, and some of the oldest pipes in New Zealand, including parts of the network that are over 130 years old. These are not optional costs. Many of them have been building for decades. This week's weather event really highlights the need to invest in our networks, in particular stormwater and drinking water. For a number of years, Waitaki has been operating with an unbalanced budget, but we've not rated enough to cover the true cost of providing services. This is not because our operating costs have run away. Our operating expenditure is within budget and broadly the same as it was 2 years ago, despite inflation. The issue is that income has not kept pace with the cost of services, infrastructure, and legal obligations that our community expects and requires. I also want to address one more point that can be confusing in financial statements. Revaluation movements do not create actual income or cash. They do not help council pay the bills. That's why they're shown after surplus or deficit in financial statements. They simply recognise that our assets are worth more, and the other side recorded in equity. They may make the balance sheet look better, but because we cannot generally sell the assets our community relies on, for instance, our roading network, bridges, water pipes, these revaluations are not especially helpful when it comes to meeting day-to-day costs. Even now, our average rates are 3,330, placing Waitaki 49th out of 67 councils nationally. In terms of population, we're 44th, despite being the 11th biggest geographical area. This is lower than the average rate in Dunedin, being 4,167, Timaru 3,700, Waimati 3,637, Central Otago 3,460, and boldly in line with Mackenzie at 3,326. These comparisons do not make today's increase easy, but they do show that Waitaki has held rates lower for a long time. Over the past 10 years, Waitaki's rates have increased by a really large 60%. By comparison, Timaru has increased by 102%, Central Otago 120%, Waimati 64%, Dunedin 95%, Mackenzie 135%. That context matters. It shows it's not a sudden desire to increase rates for its own sake. The accumulated effect of keeping increases lower than many others while real costs of services, infrastructure and compliance continued to rise. At 16.9%, we'll be sitting at a debt level of 127.6 million with a revenue of 91 million. We'll be sitting at 140% of our debt benchmark. At 16.9%, we have allayed immediate concerns to our bank, the local government funding agency, although this figure does not allow for debt repayment. Fundamentally, as a community, we are still spending more than we're collecting. For an organisation responsible for water, roads, public facilities, emergency response and essential community services, that is not a safe place to remain for long. It does not mean that council should be blind to hardship. We must continue to work with ratepayers who are genuinely struggling, including taking a compassionate and practical approach to penalties where appropriate. But compassion requires honesty. Promising a low increase today when the financial reality does not support it will not remove the pressure. It will delay it, it will deepen it, and it will pass a larger burden to our children and our grandchildren. I want to say to Kirsty and to Keith and to everyone involved in the petition, your advocacy has actually been heard. It's entirely fair to challenge council, to question decisions and to ask for clearer information and to expect accountability. Democracy is stronger when people participate, but we must also be able to disagree without dividing our district into sides or assuming bad faith from people who are also trying to serve Waitaki. Our staff have continued to deliver services, answer questions, revise budgets, support this process under intense scrutiny. Our elected members have debated hard, challenged advice, sought alternatives, and carried the weight of this decision. We have had good debates and genuine differences in views, as a good council should, and we're united in our commitment to good governance, to taking this council and community forward and making the tough calls that are required. So today I will be voting to adopt the annual plan with a 16.9% rates increase. I ask elected members to do the same, not because it's easy, not because it's popular, and not because it removes the hardship our community is feeling, but because it is responsible decision-making required to keep council financially stable, meet our water obligation and provide essential services, and avoid shifting even greater costs to future ratepayers. Passing this annual plan today does not end that conversation, it begins the next one. When water transfers, we still have a lot of hard work to do through long-term plans, service levels, assets and affordability, but our future rate rises are not projected to be anywhere near this level. By level 2 of the long-term plan, we expect to be within the range of the proposed rates cap. We must do that work together. Waitaki needs strong local leadership, clear information and respectful debate, and a shared commitment to a sustainable future. I know this is a painful day for many. I also believe it's a necessary step if we were to be honest about who we are, where we are, responsible about where we're going, and fair to the generations who will inherit the decisions that we make today. So I know it's unusual for me to have a speech of that length, but this has been a really long process that has been a really tough process, and I do push back on the people questioning us saying it's being a tough process, because it really has been. We are listening, but we're also trying to do the right thing. That being said, I will ask if the CE would like to start with introducing the adoption of the annual plan item.
Thank you, Mayor Mel, and I just want to acknowledge your leadership. It's a tough time for local government, for all councils, and particularly rural councils. And so, the past few months have been tough, and this week in particular has been very tough. And just to acknowledge the leadership and care you've shown for your community during this week in particular. The Waitaki District Council 26-27 annual plan is complete and ready for adoption. It must be adopted today, and rates set for the 26-27 rating year in line with the requirements for the 30th of June deadline as set out in the Local Government Act 2002. Agreeing the plan and setting the rates is not only a legal requirement, rates represent our main source of funding, and without agreeing the plan and setting the rates, council will not have the required revenue to pay for the services our community needs or borrow the funds to put towards our investment programme. The plan before you delivers the year 2 of the 2025-34 long-term plan work programme. There are some additional items in there as per the water services delivery plan that was agreed in discussion with DIA, as well as some projects that weren't completed in the last financial year that have been carried over for completion in this year. Also set out in the report there are the steps that we've taken through this process, including the directions you've given to officers to make further changes to the plan that don't impact on service levels, particularly deferral of some capital works where that was possible, further efficiency savings that have been found, use of the special dividend, the 1 million special dividend from Whitestone Contracting to offset rate rises in this financial year only. Removal of the component rates rise proposed to deal with the risk of increased prices, particularly as a result of global events, and a commitment to an in-year efficiency saving of $500,000 to further reduce the rates rise. Whilst these changes have been made to ease the impact on ratepayers, it's my job to inform you that council needs to recognise this annual plan doesn't address the structural financial challenges that the council faces and continues a deficit position. It also presents a risk to council that it won't be able to meet the budgets within the financial year for factors outside of its control. The weather events we've experienced this week in the first full week of the financial year are a case in point in this, where we're incurring unbudgeted expenditure to deal with that and to support our community. And we also see this week that global volatility continues, which impacts on supplies and the cost of those supplies to us as a council. As you mentioned in your introduction, the council has absorbed a lot of inflationary costs within its operating budget and maintained those operating budgets at the same level for the past few years, despite the cost pressures. And the cost drivers are around investing in our infrastructure and meeting higher standards and additional obligations that are placed on us as a council. Council has taken on a delivery programme that is now 4 times larger than what it was 5 years ago to invest in its essential infrastructure. It's done this by taking on more specialist staff, such as engineers and project managers. And as you mentioned, a significant part of this increase is associated with the water investment programme that we are legally obliged to deliver. But it's put in place these additional roles whilst actually overall reducing staff. So delivering a much bigger programme whilst reducing staff overall by looking at how it can work more efficiently through the transformation programme. So genuine efficiency has been achieved to deliver that. But in the scale of the cost increases we're seeing, particularly around the capital programme, those efficiencies aren't enough to deal with what was already pre-existing structural deficits within the council. In addition, we've also seen significant other cost increases outside of our control. So the increased value of assets means the increased cost of depreciation. On top of that, insurance premiums, energy costs, lots of other things that we just simply cannot control. And we need to recognise that efforts to absorb costs and work more efficiently through transformation in the face of the massive demand on all councils and cost increases are placing a heavy burden, and that with rates being the main source of funding, a proportion of that needs to be transferred onto ratepayers in the absence of other levers to pull to reduce our costs. You've mentioned the comparison with our neighbouring councils. Most of our neighbours have already addressed this issue progressively. But we need to recognise in this that all communities are different and have different demographics. And so looking at how we support our community is really important in this process. In adopting this annual plan, we need to immediately then look forward to the long-term plan and how we address the ongoing unsustainable financial position of the council. And the challenge will be, in removing waters, how we do this in a way that deals with what will be stranded overheads within our budgets. So the cost pressures will be increased in that sense with less rates to pay for some of those overheads. So the LTP will be challenging. There are always more efficiencies to be found, but I think we need to be realistic that the level of efficiencies required are nowhere near what the savings are that we need to close the financial gap. There will be efficiencies there undoubtedly, but the LTP will be challenging as we will need to look at how we do things differently and make some tough decisions with the community on the levels of service that we can provide going forward into the future. So therefore it's recommended in the report there that you adopt the annual plan for 26-27. I'll just check with whether you want to add anything to that. No. Okay.
Councillors, we'll start. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Thelma.
Yeah, I note on page 14 near the bottom it references damaging council's credit rating. And I was just after some clarity there. I understand we don't have a credit rating. Does that just mean it's damaging the confidence that LGFA has in us, or is there actually a credit rating of some sort?
Yeah, we don't have a public credit rating. We aren't credit rated as such, but yeah, LGFA is our banker, just like any bank would with an individual or entity. It has thresholds that it keeps an eye on, and it is keeping a watching brief on us because of our current financial picture.
No, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mel. Look, I've got a few questions. The first of them relates to something you mentioned on page 8 of the report and also page 18, where you say we've had to add to the budget not only the 3 waters projects required to match the water services delivery plan, and these were projects that we've been required to add by outside agencies, specifically I think the Department of Internal Affairs. But you then go on to say, and the grandstand. And on page 18, there's a reference to the fact that although we're not paying 6 million, which is the estimated cost thereof, we have to add that amount to the budgets. And I'm just wondering why that is. And what is as I understand it, we're moving an unspent amount of money from the original event centre budget to as seed funding for the grandstand in the order of about $400,000. So why aren't we just entering 400,000? We are not spending 5.6 million. Why is it in the books?
It's accounting standards. So on one side of it, we recognise, because it's going to be our asset at the end of the day, and we will pay the bills as the build happens. The invoices come to us and we're required to pay them. So we recognise that as an asset building on our balance sheet. And then the other side of it, you have to do another side of the entry, how we're paying for it. And that's the grant income. So you'll see right at the top, revenue from grants and subsidies has increased in this latest budget for the other side of that. There is 500,000 council has resolved of contingency funding from stage 1 that will go towards that as well. So that's all been appropriately accounted for in line with accounting standards. But because that asset will be ours at the end of the day, we need to recognise that spend.
Well, look, okay. Are we entitled to say sod the accounting standards? If this is adding to an identified rates burden, in other words, if by throwing $6 million extra into our budgets, we're ending up with a rate increase that might have been 15.2 or whatever, rather than 16.9, why don't we opt for the lower figure?
It helps our financial picture. We have an increased asset on the balance sheet, which is a good thing, of $6 million, and we have extra revenue from external parties of $6 million. So that has meant that our deficit is a lot lower than it would have otherwise been if we hadn't had that grant and that external fund. It doesn't affect rates revenue whatsoever.
Well, and that perhaps, if I may, leads to another question, because it's all very well to say we've got $6 million worth of external funding, but we don't. And indeed, a recent PAR meeting identified, and it was confirmed by both yourself and Mr. Palmley, that essentially our deficit at the moment is what it is because outside parties have not given us money they promised. In other words, we're saying to the public of this district, sorry, we've got a deficit. What we haven't made clear, in my view, is that deficit is not of our making. It's the fact that other people have failed to deliver on promises or commitments they made to us. Is that a correct statement?
Not entirely. It's the timing of when they deliver. It's not necessarily that they've failed to deliver. So a lot of that income for the 26 financial year is contractually going to be received in later years now, like the naming rights for the Network Waitaki. And the Network Waitaki naming rights is over 10 years as opposed to all being received in this financial year. And we've explained that in detail in the PAR committee meetings for why the grants and donations haven't been received for that particular phase 1 of the project. In terms of this one, the council has resolved that that project will not begin until the funding is confirmed. So we expect to have funding agreements in place, signed contractual arrangements before we start spending money. So council will we'll have a grandstand at the end of it at no cost to us.
I'll
That's
just get
intention.
Alex to touch on that too before we jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a few things. So we're confusing different deficits. So the funding that you're referring to related to phase 1, we budgeted to get that in the last financial year, so the financial year just ended, and so that's what's been reported to PAR as contributing towards an end of year deficit. That hasn't contributed to the deficit in this year's budget, other than we are taking out more borrowing to cover that cost. So the structural deficit existed regardless of whether we were getting that income in for phase 1 or not. That deficit for this financial year that you're agreeing an annual plan for was there regardless of whether we had the income in for the event centre or not. And it's about the timing of that income. We're expecting that income to come. It just hasn't arrived in the financial year we expected to do, i.e. last financial year.
But as I understand it, it hasn't arrived yet either. nor has the money that was supposed to be paid by the Crown as its contribution to the Forester Gallery extension. And what we have been told is that that has contributed to the fact that we're going to have to borrow money to plug the gaps that should have been filled by those who were fundraising for the event centre and the Crown, which was contributing to the Forester Gallery extension. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we've discussed that in the PAR committee, and as Alex has outlined, that's related to the 26 financial year, so it doesn't impact on the 27 financial year's deficit. And in terms of phase 2, which is what we're talking about today, what's in the 27 budget, that income is all from external sources. Council is not ratepayer funding the grandstand whatsoever. And the other side of it, the build, will not happen. We won't be incurring costs until we've got that income assured.
A simple question. Has the money that the people who said they would help fund the event centre arrived in our bank account yet? Has the money from the department, from the Crown for the Forester Gallery arrived in our bank account yet? It is now in the new financial year. If it hasn't turned up, surely it's part of the current deficit as well as last year's.
Everything that was contractually meant to be received in the 26 financial year has been received, including the money from the ministry for the Forester Gallery. There is differences between what we budgeted for 26 versus what will actually eventuate, because some contracts now, we have signed contracts in place where some income will be received in future years, 27, 28 and out for 10 years. And there's also, I've talked about this, two netball courts out there, two courts out there that do not have sponsors yet. So they're $200,000 each, which we don't have contractual obligations for. So that timing of that receipt is uncertain.
So
I have a number of councillors waiting to speak, so one other question.
Question, if I may ask.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so it would appear that the deficit this year is composed of different things than it was last. Okay. I'm just curious about penalties. There's a reference to penalties in the resolution regarding rates. I think that penalties reference is on page 102 of our report. And there's also, we're told on page 10 that we can't do anything about penalties because we have to consult. Were we to decide that we might do something about penalties, but because of the urgency of making a decision which is already overdue, we're not going to consult, who would penalise us, or who would censure us, and what would the censure be?
We set our penalty at 10% in the rating policies that are either within the long-term plan that we approved in June last year, or underlying documents on our website that are linked from there, referred to in the long-term plan. So in those policies, that's what we're tied to. That's what we have to apply the rate of 10%. If we were to change that, we need to publicly consult, and that's quite a process. And typically we undertake all those policy consultation procedures at once as part of the long-term plan, which we will be doing at the start of next year. We'll start consulting on the next long-term plan. And so if we were to apply a penalty other than what is in our policy, I'm not sure who would raise it with people potentially wouldn't be obliged to pay if it's not in line with policy. Auditors would probably have something to say. Yeah, it's just not appropriate to do so.
And councillor.
Okay, so to be clear, audit might express concern, but what would the actual consequences be if we consciously chose to make a change to a policy without going through the consultation that we would normally be expected to undertake?
You can't do that. The Local Government Act requires us to consult.
I'll just pass to Mr. Hope around just what we are doing rather than looking at what we're not doing, because I think that there's still relief being offered, and so I think we're just getting a bit stuck in the detail around that. Can you add anything to that, Mr. Hope?
Yeah, I think, it's what we tried to cover in the third report on the agenda. If you make an adjustment to the penalties in the rates resolution, that is general relief to everybody, including quite a number of ratepayers that will take advantage of it, because that's what's happened in the past when council has had a different penalty regime. I think what you were asking about was a more targeted response, and again, that's something that we can discuss in the third report. The consequence of a wholesale change to the penalty regime is that the penalty is a significant income stream included in the annual plan, so that you would immediately have a financial impact that would add to, I think, some of the concerns that the Chief Executive already expressed in terms of the achievability of the financial performance you've set out in the annual plan.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd add as well is that, applying penalties is not the automatic thing that we do. The finance team, the rating team there work with people who are struggling to pay. It's a last resort rather than a first resort in terms of ensuring that we're not inflicting further hardship on people. But penalties are still there for necessary as a backstop, really, to if people are not willing to pay. But we work with people to try and alleviate their issues and work through how we can make it more affordable, and payment plans and such like.
I was going to say. Mike wasn't on. I was just saying that for those that are charged penalties and there's a concern around their ability to pay, certainly contacting council, because there is an ability for us to forgive those penalties on compassionate grounds. So I just recommend you do get in touch with the rates team, because they will work on payment options and potentially having a look at the penalties on that. I'll move to Councillor Gowning.
I've got a few questions around what I view as the hole in the budget. We've got down to 17%, but there's a lot of stuff that's not being addressed, therefore. The first question, when we set the 7% rise in the LTP last year, what was the assumed cost of diesel at the time, being one of the big, the cost, or perhaps the barrel of oil or whatever it was at the time when we set it?
I do not recall the exact cost of diesel, but in terms of our actual expenditure, like cold hard diesel cost is not a significant portion of our actual budget. It's the indirect cost of that. So our maintenance contractors that are out mowing the lawns at all of our parks and reserves, the maintenance on our roads, Tarsiel, the PVC pipes made from diesel. So it's all those indirect costs, even our plumbers and electricians at our variety of buildings and centres all charge mileage, which is related to that, and that's had a significant increase. So I'm not exactly sure what the cost of diesel was at that time, but at the time we presented the budgets back in March, we initially asked for a 2% increase, from 7 to 9, because of the costs that we had already felt in the 26 financial year in relation to those indirect fuel cost increases. For example, the PVC pipes had already gone up by 25%. So that's a lot of our maintenance costs are in relation to those. And then the costs of our parks maintenance and Three Waters maintenance and roading maintenance sort of contractor costs as well. The on charge of their direct costs of fuel to us had meant that we had already incurred increased costs higher than what we expected when we set the LTP in June last year. So does that help? Well, I can't tell you the exact figure.
Yeah, I was just sort of looking at the That does. I think you've asked the question, answered the question better than I asked it, actually. The other one was the water depreciation. Am I right in thinking that's every year, that $9 million?
Yes, so we do not rate fund water's depreciation, so it's another accounting requirement. We have to put it there to be in line with accounting standards. It sits there as an expenditure. It's not cash that leaves the business, but we need to recognise that value of the Three Waters infrastructure is, that's recognising its use over the life of its asset. So the fact that we aren't rates funding that means we are not putting away that money in a reserve to fund those assets when they need to be replaced. The money's just not going to be there when we need it. And we do dip into depreciation reserves for preventative maintenance and things like that as well. So yeah, the money's not going to be there every single year that we don't rate fund it. And our policy at the moment is not to rate fund it. So it's a big conversation to have in the future.
Yeah, and I also my sort of observation is that we've basically lost control of the water and it's been handed over to Southern Waters largely because of that approach that councils around the country have taken for a long time now, which is in stark contrast to other network operators that have put depreciation aside and have got much lower rate increases of their rates that they charge. Is it fair to say that we're building a bit of a bow wave of costs ahead of us that'll have to be paid in the future? That the longer we keep rates lower than the break even, the more we'll have to pay in the future at a steeper curve, given that there's about 233 million of the water plan in 8 years that's mandated. So the lower that we've got the rate set this year, the higher that cost is going to come in, or steeper that'll come in the future.
Yeah, I guess, yes, yes. But when you say we, you're talking about the greater district, including Southern Waters' share of Waitaki infrastructure, because obviously those assets leave council, so we council will not be burdened by that cost, but we need to keep in mind that water charges will increase to cover that increased bill.
Councillor Schlack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start off before I ask my rather simple question. I just want to make a comment. I've listened to the submissions and I had my audio on mute, obviously. But I got to tell you that what's been said today, I think, crosses a line. The things that were said, statements that were made, particularly the names that we were called, that crosses a line with me. We deal with our community with respect. We respect that there is people that disagree with us, and I expect that in return of the same thing. I will also say that your statement, Mayor Melanie Tavendale, you and I don't agree on everything, and there's some minor things. Well, there is some things in your statement we don't agree on. We know that, but we can deal with each other respectfully. And I just want to say this, that I'm pretty sure I speak for every council elected member around the table. We stand behind you. We might not agree with you, but we do respect you, and we intend to receive respect from other people with different opinions as well. So I needed to get that off my chest to start off with. I got a simple question. So we know we're heading for a deficit with this annual plan. The question is, what's the number? What's the deficit for this financial year? Not only for me, but for everybody else that is listening in. What's the figure, please, Ms. Nichols?
The exact figure is $1.344 million. So it would have been worse. Obviously, the 9 million deficit that we're still holding there for unfunding the Three Waters depreciation. But the fact that we've put in the $6 million external grants funding non-rates funding has reduced that deficit significantly. So
Thank
1.3
you.
million.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I also have some difficulties around the ground. Not necessarily the 2 million that comes from NZTA, but the 6 million for the grandstand. And I fully appreciate where Councillor Hopkins is going with his questions on there. I clearly remember from last financial year, all of a sudden 3.6 million of donations and grants we were expecting disappeared and weren't put into the next financial year. I do believe I understand where the problem lies and why it has to be included inside our books, but it's definitely something that is of concern. So thank you for that figure of $1.2 million deficit. We're just going to have to work very hard to get rid of that one as well in the next 12 months. But that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, Councillor?
Just to highlight there, if that, for whatever reason, the grandstand project doesn't go ahead, or if we don't get the grants funding, which I presume we will not carry on with the project if we don't, so the deficit will become like $7.3 million deficit.
That's my concern. Thank you.
Look, one thing that has that just occurs to me, I was unable to attend the meeting at which council voted to assign the 400,000 saving from stage 1 to the grandstand. But I want to know, when has it been decided that the grandstand will become our property? I mean, as I understand it, this is a grandstand principally sought by the rugby union and principally to be funded by contributions from them as advocates for the community assistance have provided. So is it a given that it becomes ours, or might it not be a piece of property that is retained by somebody else?
I think it's an assumption that it will become ours because it's attached to our building and it's on our land, and someone's proposing to build as an asset without us, contributing towards it. So I'm not sure I understand why you wouldn't accept the asset.
Well, because we've been told we'd be incurring costs as a consequence of so doing.
So, no, I think there's a difference here between having cost, incurring cost, and having expenditure showing in your budget. So there's expenditure showing, capital expenditure showing for that, but on the other side of the equation is the income coming in to pay for that as well. So it doesn't, it's being built not at a cost to the council is the idea behind it. So there's expenditure there, but with income coming in to pay for it.
I'm talking about maintenance, not capex.
I guess it'll be up to the most significant cost going forward. Operating costs would be putting away depreciation funding to cover maintenance and things like that. So it would be up to council in the long-term plan to decide whether it wants to fund depreciation on that asset. You may choose to not fund it whatsoever, and then when it gets to the point that it needs replaced, we won't have the depreciation funding there, and it will be up to finding other income sources to put a new one there or whatever.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryan, Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. You touched on it in your opening statement, but I was just wondering if we have responded to the minister's letter, and I guess, and if not, what our response is likely to be, and taking up the offer of assistance that has been offered.
Not at this stage, we haven't, and I think that that's something that we need to work through, and that has also been extended to us, I guess, through the Head Start conversations as well. So I think there's a real conversation as to where central government can actually provide assistance, because a lot of the things in front of us and things like spatial plan being a big part of that, I think we need to outline in our Head Start proposal what help we're looking at needing along the way, and if there's anything in particular through our long-term plan discussions that we can get help from. They're certainly extending an olive branch to say if there's any sort of work you need done in the background to help, we'll do that. So I think that's part of our conversations coming up as to how to do that. If there's any other questions, councillors, Councillor Fowling.
Yeah, but around the depreciation, because it was the first thing that we sort of swept under the carpet to get the number down. And I just also, it raises a red flag for me. If we can't afford to be putting money aside to replace our assets, can we afford the assets? It's a bit of a rhetorical question, but we need to consider the assets we've got. I'd like to be able to hold on to everything we got if we can. But my question was more around the deficit. Are we going to be debt funding the operations again? Because last time we did it, it wasn't planned. Is this a plan to do so?
Effectively, yes. The workshops that we discussed in March, we outlined alternative funding sources, like when we looked at any other levers we could pull instead of increasing rates. And the recommendation was that the lowest rates increase should be 19%. That was our initial first option. So yeah, any shortfall will principally be funded by debt, like the likes of water, where we're not putting away money funding for depreciation and we can't dip into those reserves, some of them in the negative already. The only other lever is debt funding.
Yeah, thank you. And the $1.344 million deficit, is that also contingent on the $1.5 million of savings being found?
We have built in all of those 3 resolutions that were made at the last meeting. They've all been built into the budget, including the 1.5 million. So it's already taken out of expenditure.
Yeah, could we get a breakdown of any of the areas that have been identified to make those savings so far that have been identified? I accept that we might not have the full amount identified yet, and there's a lot of work to do in PAR. But have we got any ideas at this stage, early indications perhaps?
We are working through those. It's probably not something I want to talk about publicly. Nothing controversial, but there's just some things that we're working through with external parties and things to reduce costs, looking at options for all of government contracts and reducing rates and those sorts of things. And then across the board, every single department, every single manager is looking at any tiny amount that can be removed. So yeah, just picking up every rock we can. And yeah, we'll report back on those in the PAR committee.
Thank you. Right, councillors, I'm going to move you on to page 7, which is our recommendations, 1 through to 3. I'd like to also add a 4, which is formally received the petition from Kirsty Cashmore to that, because I think it's important that we do put that on record. So I will be moving from the chair, number 1 through to 4. I'll just make sure I've given Arlene time to get that number 4 down. Do you want me to repeat that, Arlene?
I've just got receives the petition from Kirsty Cashmore.
Can we take that separately?
Yes, we can take them separately. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to look for a seconder. Do I have a seconder for all of them?
Yes, sir.
Councillor Lewis, thank you. All right, so I'm going to put them one at a time. Is there any, we'll start first of all, and it will be across all 4 of them. Is there any comments that people would like to make? Councillor Downing. Councillor Downing, thank you.
Yeah, I don't intend to support the adoption of the annual plan. The only comments I'd make in favour I do want to thank the people responsible. I think probably Amanda and Paul for the even-handed nature of spreading such a large burden across all different types of properties. Traditionally, we've seen the rural properties take much greater percentage increases than a lot of others on what are already very large bills. So I'd just like to thank you for that on behalf of all the people affected. The reason I won't be supporting the annual plan is it's a false economy, in my view. We're just going to end up paying more in the future, and it's that simple. I hear what Keith and Kirsty are saying. I actually agree it is unaffordable. I haven't got an answer for that. It will cause harm. I don't have an answer for that. But I don't want to cause more harm in the future than what we are now, and it's just that simple. Yeah, the further we fall short now, the more we've got to make up in the future with interest.
Okay, I've got Councillor Schlack, then Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will also not be supporting sorry, I have to pull this one in front of me. Obviously, I will support receiving the letter from Minister Simon Watts. I will not be supporting this annual plan, nor will I support the 17% in a next resolution. My reasons are similar to what Councillor Thellinger said to me, and I'll just read off a simple statement. I believe that approving this annual plan will effectively triple the burden of the next generations of council and ratepayers. Not only will the next generation have to find a financial way to cover their own operational expenses, they'll also have to cover the ever-increasing debt we continue to create and somehow find revenue to rebuild our failing infrastructure, for which we have deliberately failed to put depreciation aside for. I will therefore not support this annual plan nor the proposed rate rise of only just 17%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought at this stage we were discussing only resolution number 1.
All resolutions.
Pardon?
Well, we're discussing all 4.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll make some comment about the first 2 then. I think it is worth noting that the Minister's letter probably avoids some of the more torrid criticisms that were heaped upon us earlier this afternoon. I would note, for instance, the second paragraph, I have received advice from my officials that whilst the rate increases proposed in the annual plan are high, the amount being charged is comparable and in some cases lower than other provincial and rural councils. Council revenue needs to be sufficient to meet responsibilities in the delivery of core services and legislative requirements. There's no doubt that our district has been the whipping boy, if you like, or the bête noire, the favoured villain in terms of public comment and talkback, feedback and so on. Indeed, even as recently as yesterday, I heard one talkback host implicitly endorsing a letter from, I think, a political candidate who curiously asserted that we've been running surpluses for years rather than deficits. And I found myself scratching my head and wondering how that might be possible from someone who was seeking a parliamentary mandate. However, it is disappointing to hear councillors say they won't support the annual plan, because my view is that at some point there's an obligation on all of us to actually accept the collective or the majority view. And there is probably no document more important, or certainly no document of greater importance than the annual plan. Perhaps the annual report equals it. And whereas I, like others, am uncomfortable or don't like the rate increase, I feel that I have a duty, not only to the petitioners, but also to the fact that around the council table, there has been and I make this point very clearly, principled and committed and intelligent consideration of alternatives. This has displayed a considerable amount of integrity, and the consistency that people have applied to the positions they've taken also demonstrates, in my view, that integrity. I was really angry today to hear people accuse us of lack of integrity and cowardice. And I think Franz's point that we are respectful and should be, but we are entitled to some modicum of respect in return is entirely appropriate. I do think what we have ended up with doesn't sit well with me, but it's the best that is possible by way of consensus. I congratulate the Mayor for reading the room and accepting that the original 22% was an untenable position to persist with. I thank officers for the work they did to actually help to facilitate a reduction, and I'm glad we supported it. Personally, I would have liked to have seen us support a greater reduction, but I totally accept, as I say, the principled decision of others not to. It's a decision that was expressed with integrity. I would just make the final point. It is interesting that Mr. Marshall, Keith Marshall, identified the median income here as 35 compared with the national average of 41. 70% are in dependency brackets, 1 in 4 over 65. And I would suggest that these statistics in and of themselves demonstrate precisely why we have worked so hard over a number of years to keep rates as low as possible. We have understood the nature of our community. We have worked as hard as possible to actually make things affordable. This year, the perception of the council and officers is that we've hit the wall, and the consequence is the rate increase that we are confronted with. As I say, I would like it to have been lower, but I'm not going to vote against the annual plan and put the council's actual existence and statutory obligations at risk by so doing. And I would encourage those who have chosen to take that position to rethink it as an expression of unity in the greater good.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkin. I've got Councillor McCone, then Councillor Cowles.
Firstly, I'd just like to express the disgust I had and the vitriol and then hazard that was, everybody's here trying to do a job and they're ratepayers and they're doing the best they can and have been elected to do so. And to stand up and do that is actually an insult to what we're trying to do here. Secondly, as far as I think it's been covered off, I don't like any rate rise, but 17% at the moment is realistic and we're democratically done. And as I am getting sick of saying in this chamber, the last 2 or 3 decisions, we don't have too many choices. We're there. The cost of actually turning this down or trying to get an increase is not there. The cost of not getting it out on time, not only do we break the rules as far as legislation goes, but we also put ourselves in more financial jeopardy by holding up with the next rate take for the cash flow of this district. And that in itself is huge. That breaking that cash flow could actually cost you more than you're trying to save. So, but we do have, and I made the stand when we're talking about this, that I would not support any rate rise and put the stick in the ground unless we started to show accountability. Well, there's been 2 or 3 things that have put up that we are going to start that accountability for the long-term plan. We can't do it now, but those recommendations have come through and they're coming through the system, and it will enable us to go and do that. So again, while I don't endorse it, I think we don't have too many choices, and so I'll sit with it.
Thank you, Councillor Cowles.
Thank you, Mayor. Guess I want to speak pretty plainly today. It's not been an easy process, certainly not for the community, not for elected members sitting around the table. A rates increase of this size is very serious, and it does affect households, pensioners, farms, businesses, and people already facing higher costs of power, insurance, fuel, food, interest, wages, and compliance. We all know that prices across the board have gone up, and we're not immune to that. I want to acknowledge properly to those that have contacted me. They've stopped me in the street, spoken to me at work, at our pub, at the shop, by the phone, email, meetings, and a sincere thank you. Some conversations have been very direct and difficult, but many have been respectful, constructive, and grounded in genuine concern for the district. That is democracy working as it should. People have the right to challenge council. They have every right to question spending, staffing, priorities, projects, debt, water service levels, and whether council is delivering value for money. If we're asking the community to carry a significant rates increase, then the community is entitled to expect a high level of scrutiny from us. But I also need to say this clearly. Abuse, threats, and intimidation are not acceptable, not towards elected members, not towards staff, not towards families, and not towards members of the public who hold a different view. That is not robust debate. It's not accountability, and it does nothing to solve the very real issues in front of us. And I also need to call out the misinformation. People are entitled to opinions. They're entitled to strongly disagree. But when figures are used without context, when claims are made that are not factual, when complex issues are reduced to slogans, it makes it a lot harder for the community to understand what's really in front of us and cut through the noise. And that is the point I keep coming back to. It's the real choices that we have here. Nobody around this table wants to put rates up like this. I certainly don't. And wanting a lower number, and having a lawful, funded and deliverable alternative are two different things. I've been consistent through this process. Saying no to a rates increase is the easy part. Finding an alternative that actually holds up is the hard part. Council has heard very clearly that people want costs reduced, so do I. We need to keep pressure on efficiencies, service levels, staffing structures, procurement, project delivery, asset performance, and whether we're focused on the right things. We also need to be honest about what we can and can't be done in this timeframe. Council cannot simply slash services or staffing overnight because pressure is high. We're bound by employment law, consultation requirements, contracts, statutory obligations, and our own long-term plan process. If we materially change levels of service, that requires a proper process, proper consultation, and due time. Some of the big cost areas are not optional extras. Water, wastewater, stormwater, and roads are core infrastructure. They are the basics. There are also areas where costs have increased, standards have changed, and historic underfunding is now showing up in front of us. The difficult truth is that Waitaki has had a long period where rates were held lower, and the true cost of delivering the services and infrastructure our community expects have raised. This is not about one decision, 1 year, or one line in the budget. This is a long-term structural issue. The original 7% forecast in the long-term plan was no longer financially viable. The annual plan work clearly showed that. Council consulted on options from 19% to 45% because we had to face the actual financial position and not because anyone wanted to scare the community. After consultation, we got to 22, and now with some further adjustments, we've brought the proposed average increase down to 16.9%. It's been achieved through Whitestone contracting dividend, changes to assumptions and savings to be found during the year. That is a lower number, and I know some people will welcome that, but it doesn't fix the underlying issue. There's been comment that council should simply use other funding, including an overdraft. I do not accept that it is a solution. Borrowing for life infrastructure can be appropriate because future ratepayers also benefit from the asset, but borrowing to cover day-to-day operating shortfalls is very difficult. That is like telling a household already under pressure to put the grocery bill on a credit card and call it a savings plan. It's not responsible governance. I understand why people are frustrated. In some areas, I agree council must keep pushing harder, but I will not support a decision that sounds good in the room and then falls apart when it hits law, contract, service levels, or limits on delivery. That means balancing affordability for today's ratepayers with the responsibility not to push today's costs onto tomorrow's ratepayers. I will support today's decision. It has been done through a long process, through lots of discussion around the table by speaking with many in our community. There were voices out there that weren't being heard that were also in support. I'm not saying that the petition or anything that belittles that in any way, but we are here to make what I firmly believe is the right decision moving forward for our community, and this is one today I will support.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mayor Tavendale. It's certainly been an interesting time to be a first-term councillor. There are very many challenges and things have come at us in rapid succession. I just want to echo the words of my colleagues that this has not been a simple, straightforward process. We have given a lot of robust thought and examination to these. We haven't plucked figures out of the air. It hasn't been one of those things that we don't care, because as the Mayor has said, we're all residents, we're all ratepayers, we're all family people, and it's important to us. You know, there's many of us were born here and brought up here, and it is personal. I don't want to see a huge rates increase, but the reality of it is that this role is not about doing the popular thing, it's about doing the right thing. And it would be wrong to put us in a position where we were actually moving forwards worse off. The weather event this week has highlighted the fact that we need some room for manoeuvre. If anything should show the importance of infrastructure, and it should show the importance of actually having a degree of operating capacity, that has been a highlight of it. It should really show where we're at. This is not a problem that's unique to the Waitaki either. It's across the country. And again, it comes back to the funding mechanism and the responsibility that is expected to be put upon residents within a district to fund the infrastructure for that district. If you have a lot of people in a small area, it's a lot easier to do. We don't have that. So I think we can do what we can at the moment, but moving forwards and with the potential changes to local government or the proposed changes to local government, whatever they may be when they actually do materialise in full, that's an opportunity for us to actually address that. It doesn't stop things happening right now. We have to continue. We have to keep moving forwards with it. To that end, I will be supporting this increase. I have concerns that it's enough, but I also am acutely aware of the burden that is on our community. And as I say, we are not divorced from that. We are part of this community and we feel that. So I think the important thing as we move forward is to recognise that it is done with the best of intentions, and for us to be able to disagree, but there's a line I like, it's to agree to disagree agreeably. It's not making it personal, it's understanding why people are voting or coming from the position they're coming from. And I would just encourage our community to take that on board and to understand that if we were able to do things in a different way, and there's been many ways suggested, but there's been no evidence of backup that that is actually achievable, and we have gone through the numbers. So this is where we're at, and at this is why I'll be supporting the 17.9%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holding.
Yeah, unfortunately, my integrity doesn't change the numbers that we have in front of us and the trajectory that local government's on. It's tough and it's real, and it's addressing a long time of structural deficit in the country right forward. But I think what is integrity is the good faith that everyone around this table has had, working with staff and revisiting numbers and having to recast, working with the people and hearing their concerns, which has been hard as well. And yeah, so thanks for everyone the work that has been put in. It's been a trickiest long-term plan or annual plan that I've been involved in. But I think as we move into the long-term plan discussions, there's more to come. But will address some more tough conversations. So I'll be supporting the 17% today as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. We've got a responsibility today to provide certainty for the council and the community. So I'll be supporting the resolutions in front of us and echoing a lot of the comments that have already been made from all sides of the debate, feeling the weight of what the community is dealing with right now, but also what, as a result, our children and our grandchildren will inherit. When we're talking about local government reform on Tuesday, that's where we really need to be thinking and where we should always be operating in this role. My support comes with some pretty clear expectations that I think a lot of us around this table share too, and that our community is taking on a significant burden here, and in return they deserve real confidence that we are equally committed to having some really challenging conversations and challenging ourselves over especially this next year as we move into the long-term plan. We start these PAR workshops looking at savings and efficiencies and genuine organisational change and improvement. The next 12 months, we've got some of the biggest strategic decisions this district has faced, and indeed every district across the country is facing in decades, with the transition of Three Waters, the Head Start process and wider local government reform. And these next steps need to be really challenging, transparent and focused on building on a stronger and sustainable future. This has been a really difficult few months, and there's been a lot of strong opinions and emotions and some really difficult conversations. And I do just want to touch on a point that Councillor Hopkins made earlier, I guess, about how it sort of seems to have been defining Waitaki in local, regional, national conversations. And it's a lot of conversations that I've been having with even friends, colleagues, people in the community. It's touching every sort of part of their lives at the moment. And I think through these next steps, my hope is that we can kind of move from that negative and that division to real purpose, from looking backwards to looking forwards, and to working together to address where we are and move forward. And we won't always agree, and that's fine. But I really hope we can move forward with respect and a real shared commitment to making this place that we all love, that is our home, better, because that's what our community deserves. And I believe that's who we are and who we can be.
Is there any other councillors that want to speak? Councillor Benini.
Yeah, no, thank you. Through the chair, I wasn't too sure if I was going to say anything, but I feel, that it needs to. I'm very grateful for us re-looking at the rates. I knew that we had landed on the 22% a few weeks ago, and then I was heavily burdened and I felt weighed down, and I really appreciated the Mayor for bringing us back around the table and just having another look at it. And I do appreciate our staff as well for having the consideration to have another look at everything. I do acknowledge the community and the petition and the community-led action as well, and I think that we do our best to be respectful of everybody, but it's a challenging situation that we're in. And I recall a couple of weeks ago when I had to join online because I was actually calling in from MSD head office, because I was trying to meet with the officials up there to look at other opportunities around assistance for our community. So while it may not look obvious what we are doing in front of the camera or online, there is a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that tries to advocate and support the needs of our community. It's not something that we have to show off about or anything. It's just something that we do. So I think, in saying that, I will be supporting the resolutions that we have in front of us. We've done our best to try and land somewhere with that we can move forward in terms of the annual plan, just so we can signal to the team as well that they can get on with the work that needs to be done. I think we've delayed it enough, and we just need to move forward. We've got some other bigger picture solutions that we need to be discussing and concentrating on. And I think that's the space that we can look at doing a lot more strategic work. So just thank you for doing the best that we can. Whilst it's not as low as what I had hoped, it is the best that we can do at this stage. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. All right, I'm going to go back to the resolutions and I'm going to start with number 1, which is received the attached letter to Mayor Tavendale from Minister Simon Watts regarding Waitaki rates increases. So that number 1, I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. So moving on to number 2, which is adopts the Waitaki District Council 26-27 annual plan. I wonder if we take and out of the efforts, taking them independently. Thank you. Councillor Lewis, you're happy with me taking and out of there? Yes. Seconded. Just checking. Right. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
That's carried. And that's with Councillor Schlack and Councillor Thowning voting against. So moving on to number 3, which is delegates the authority to the Council's Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor to make any necessary final connections or minor amendments to the 2026 annual plan prior to legal deposit. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. And then finally, the new number 4, which has received the petition from Kirsty Cashmore. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. All right, and with that, thank you very much, councillors, and for those that have joined us today, to staff for the work that has been. Have we got other items? Sorry, I'm moving too far into that one. Right, what page are we moving to?
So page 97, resolution to set the rates.
Of course, that's slightly important in this mix.
Don't skip that bit.
Don't skip that one.
Why don't we just go home now?
All right.
The doors.
So we've got a really long resolution there on page 97, which is around the actual setting of the rates. And it goes on for several pages. I'm happy to move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Hopkins. All right, is there any comments on that?
Speaking to it very quickly, I'm not seconding it with any enthusiasm because, like others, I have indicated that, you know, my personal preference would have been for a different figure. But I accept the consensus thoughtfully and principally arrived at by the council as a collective group, accommodating a range of different views. And I would just make the point that representing the community doesn't necessarily mean automatically and inevitably obeying what might be an expressed view. Representative democracy is precisely about elected persons using their best judgment and their principled consideration of outcomes and options in order to arrive at the optimum result. And I would just contrast both the mood and the outcome of the engagement we've had with the community about the Head Start program and local government amalgamation, where we've had thoughtful, polite and considered contributions, where the council has listened to those, accommodated them, largely incorporated them. And so there is clear evidence of 2 parallel strands of engagement and consultation that have generated different results and do, in fact, in my view, both embody the principles of representative democracy quite appropriately, even though in one instance there is disagreement between petitioners and the council as an entity. I was going to move an amendment to the resolution reducing the penalty for late payment from 10% to 5%, but I was persuaded by the arguments of officers when I asked them questions that this was legally untenable. So beyond actually rather wistfully expressing the yearning for such a low figure, I'll support what's in front of us.
Does anyone else want to speak to that? Councillor McCone.
Yeah, just reading these numbers, it just highlights how bad the system is, and that the rural community again doesn't do well out of this when the uniform rate is based on the land value in the district. And I think that needs to be highlighted, and it goes along quite a few things, including the water rate and everything and others, because they are essential parts of their business, and yet they keep getting smashed because they've got to have a large amount of land to actually make it viable.
Yeah, our rural ratepayers certainly do cover a huge burden of this rate take. Anyone else, councillors? Right, I'm going to put it. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
That's carried.
No.
And there's councillor Slack and councillor Downing voting against that. Okay, now we're going to move to page 105, and I'll just pass to Mr. Hope to introduce this one.
So, thank you, Mayor. So we were asked to come up with a paper about some potential options. I'm sorry if they seem a little limited, but really in the time we've got available, but also the legislation that we have to work in, yeah, the options are quite limited. Probably really two things. I think it is important that we do develop a program with some third parties. Some people, I think, are quite hesitant to approach council to discuss some matters like this. So perhaps having an intermediary would be very useful, and allow people to sort of talk about this situation as a whole rather than just in rates in particular. But really probably the biggest thing that people can do is consider the rates rebate scheme, to apply for that, and not only apply, but apply early. Essentially, as soon as the invoice is available, people can apply. It then sort of hits their rate account early in the year as possible, and really does, even though it's the same amount, getting it at the start of the year, I think, is far more helpful than receiving it on the last day of the year when they've already had the obligation to meet the 4 instalment payments. So, you know, that's something that we have tried to publicise in the past. We will continue to promote, but it is, you know, it's a mechanism that is available to, you know, a decent part of the community, and it is one of the few direct forms of funding that we do receive from the government to actually help people. So that's, you know, if nothing else, if we can get that message out to apply. I was almost going to say apply often and apply early, but you can only apply once, but you get your applications in as soon as possible. Council can then, if we need to, secure additional resource or direct resource to processing those applications to make sure they go through as smoothly as possible. But really with that, it is reasonably open. We can then work on the detail, some of the matters noted in the report, and come up with a solution that we can get in place and really start assisting people as soon as possible. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Councillor Bellman.
Yeah, a lot of work has gone in very quickly here, and it is quite thoughtful. But one concern I had, you might not be able to answer it now, but just if it would be considered working with the third parties. The way I see it, if you've got a big rates bill you can't afford, and the best way to eat an elephant is in the small chunks. My concern is if you get next year's elephant come along and you're still trying to eat this year's elephant, it's going to be quite you're just pushing it forward, and then there's another rates bill next year. It might just be like another small version of what we're doing with the overall rates for the whole district, where we're pushing forward the cost into the future with no guarantee that the future is going to be any more affordable.
Yeah, and I accept that, and I think, I think it's more in the case where people perhaps are carrying arrears into this year already, that they're the ones where we might need an extended payment program to actually get it to an affordable level, rather than people that are just dealing with the rate increase in this year, which is the situation you've described. But I think having some freedom to extend it out, and also people that might sort of think they can do it and they might come 6 months through the year. And so, you know, just having a bit more freedom about the guidelines, I think we'll be able to allow officers to come up with some sort of more affordable plans for people.
Amanda.
I was just going to highlight, these are the cases where we don't apply the penalty interest as well. So while the policy may specifically say 10% penalties, if people call us up and they have those sort of situations, we reverse those penalties or don't apply them in the first place. So making sure that any payment plan they do want to put in place with us is achievable, and we aren't adding those 10% on top of it, which just makes it impossible to catch up.
Councillor.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you just confirm that the eligibility and thresholds for the assistance scheme are set by central government?
So that's correct. All the parameters in relation to the rates rebate scheme is set by the government, including the amount and the eligibility criteria.
All right, so looking at the recommendations on page 105, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I'm wondering if you'd allow me to move.
Sorry, I was just getting onto that, Councillor Hopkins, from the chair, if you don't mind.
Sorry?
I was just getting onto that from the chair, if you don't mind.
Can I speak in that I'd like to move an amendment to 3?
Yes, but we'll wait until I've
Okay.
moved the recommendations first. So I'm moving 1 through to 3. Number 3 with the Mayor and Councillor Fanini Ta'iti, and implement this program as quickly as possible. So I'm moving that from the chair. Do I have seconded? Councillor Fanini Ta'iti, thank you. Right, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, based on the principle, I think this is probably something that we should all at least have some influence upon because of its importance. And acknowledging that it might take a little bit more time, but not too much, I'd like to move the following amendment to 3. Delegates to the Chief Executive the power and authority to develop a program in partnership with the Mayor and one named councillor for approval by council, and implement this program as quickly as possible, as practical.
So Councillor Fanini Ta'iti, are you comfortable? Because I'm happy with that.
Sorry?
I'm happy with the insertion of and to be approved by council. And there, Councillor Fanini Ta'iti is also happy with that. So we'll have that as part of this standard motion. Thank you, Arlene. All right, is there any comments, councillors, on this?
Are we going to name the councillors today?
I just did. It's in the.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry.
Councillor Downing.
Just actually, I've got another question, if that's all right. Will this come back through the usual channels for the reporting? I think it was to the Power Committee, so we can monitor the levels of difficulty that people are having.
Yeah, I mean, we report obviously in public excluded, sort of the debt levels and the collections acts that we're taking. So yes, we can supplement that report to sort of indicate, I suppose, both the level of rates rebate application, which we we could do in public, but certainly the sort of arrangements that we're putting in place and actions that are happening.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. Thank you. I've got wider concerns around the affordability of the entire council setup and the assets, as I mentioned earlier. So that'll be some good information to have.
Thank you. Councillor Fanini Ta'iti.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just acknowledging Councillor Downing's query. We did talk about it in the Strategy and Advocacy Committee meeting, just around a method to capture the trends and insights that might be helpful for us that are in public, and then all of the other information that we should retain in public excluded in that sense. So I think that it's important to capture that.
Thank you. All right, councillors, I'm going to put that all in favour. Please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. And I believe that is now us. So thank you for those for joining us, and we will close the meeting now. Thank you.